So new product time, we've got TaylorMade's Mill Grind 5, the latest in the iteration of the Mill Grind series. What have they changed? And what does it mean to you from a playing point of view? We'll talk through the design features, but also get a bit of data and comparison for you. So one of the biggest things you're going to hear from TaylorMade about the Mill Grind 5 series is the fact that they are forged. Now, surprisingly few wedges are forged. Most are cast because it's a slightly easier process to produce mass models, different grinds, and it's more cost effective, whereas going forged is a little bit dearer. But what it gives you is maximum feedback and maximum feel. So we all know forged irons give you the most, the softest, butteriest feel out there, loads of feedback, loads of sensation for where you've struck it, and it's that softness that's the real key. And it's a soft carbon steel that TaylorMade have used for the forging here, but it's really focusing on that key word that from a marketing point of view is huge when it comes to wedges because so few are. Even some of the biggest brands, Vokey's for example, there is a forged model out in Asia, but it's not available anywhere else in the world. So that's an area that TaylorMade are going to be hammering home pretty regularly through their marketing. Going into the actual tech of it, the material's one thing, but what have they done? So grooves. So the saw-milled groove that TaylorMade are now using, so the milling gives it a little bit more accuracy, and they're going for slightly sharper edges, and they call the radii the edges of the grooves as well, going for as steeper walls and as steeper edges as possible to maximize spin in all conditions, so be it wet or dry. But the milling in particular is about accuracy and tightening the tolerances and making them as consistent as possible. So keeping on that milling theme, consistency and tolerances, the raw heads, the kind of the starter heads that they make from these are hand ground to get the shapes and to get them spot on where they want them. Then they're mapped and then they are milled. So this means that every wedge that comes out is as consistent as possible. It minimizes tolerances, takes out any of the human element in grinding ahead to get the shape the same, and just means that consistency, product to product, grind to grind, the sole shapes, the sole widths, everything is as accurate as possible. So again, really going down that theme of accuracy and consistency from both the milling on the grooves and then the precision milling for the overall head shape as well. So when we talk about wedges, we're always talking about grinds, and there are a couple of changes, and there's one major addition to the grind shape. So let's go back over the grinds overall. So we've got the standard bounce. This is something that's very similar across all the different models, different brands of wedges. It's a moderate kind of mid grind, reasonable bit of bounce on the back edge. The standard grind in the 58 here is a 10-degree bounce. It's similar in the lower lofts as well. TaylorMade have this nice of softened curvature to the sole where where it's been milled, it's slightly rounded off rather than a kind of angled back edge. So it gives that little bit of relief, but a bit of softness through the heel, back edge. Very versatile. It's a good all-round. It's got a four-way cambered sole, so you've got a little bit of roundness on the leading edge, a little bit of heel, a little bit of toe relief, a little bit of back edge relief. Ultimate, a lot of versatility. Then we'll move into the low bounce. Now this is to keep that leading edge sat a little bit tighter. This exists in the 58 and the 60. You've got strong heel relief, shallowed off back edge. There's a nice sort of three-way grind. You've got a front edge grind that protects the leading edge, then a moderate midsection, then a cambered back edge. Great for tight surfaces or someone who really wants to kind of nip the ball underneath and open the face up a little, pop it up. Very similar to previous series grind as well. We then have the high bounce. Now, slight change in sole shape here. This sits a little bit more prominent on the back edge, a little bit of a front edge relief, but there's more cambering, there's more heel relief on the high bounce this time round. So when you're opening the face up, it just means it's a little bit more versatile for those shots around the greens, whereas previous model, the heel is a bit more prominent. This one, it's got quite a strong gradient on the heel side, but a little bit of toe relief. It actually sits a little bit more prominent on the toe for those that get a little bit steeper. So actually, ironically, too much relief on the toe can pop the ball up a little bit. A bit more bounce here just helps with flight control and divot depth consistency. Now we've also got the SC grind. Now this again, one that we've had before, that's for a standard bounce C grind. So this has got a little bit wider than the previous models, and again, a little bit more graduation on the heel, a little bit more back edge relief. So it's a little bit more versatile across different conditions. So whereas the low bounce has got cambering on the heel and the back edge, this also has that, and the same kind of strong heel relief as on the high bounce. But if you play in slightly softer conditions and want ultimate versatility around the greens, this is definitely a great option for you. And say a little bit more bounce than previous model, but a bit more versatility to the sole shaping. Now we've got the Tiger Woods grinds as well. These have been available in previous models here. So these are designed to Tiger's most recent favoured wedge grind shapes. There's a bit more leading edge progression, so a little more protection on the leading edge, but slightly more effective bounce in the heel than previous models. So on the 56, quite a strong heel grind there, but a sharp back edge, a little bit more roundness on the sole. So similar to the standard grind on the 60, but there's a little bit of a higher heel. It's a slightly kind of flattened off shape rather than rounding off on the heel and the toe. So, you know, peculiar, as if that's the right terminology, to Tiger's preferences himself. I mean, the great man, so, you know, if you want to use those, you better be decent as well. The addition to the range is the SX grind. Now, this is the widest sole shape. It's got what they call a reverse C grind on the back edge, but it's cambered, it's a gradual camber. So this allows you to have a reasonable amount of bounce because of the width of the sole, but it's a fairly soft progression, so it's not heavily cambered up or down. So it's got a high effective bounce with that bit of softening on the heel and the toe as well, again, for opening and closing the wedge, but you've got that extra width, but that back edge relief. So in slightly softer conditions, if you're not overly steep, but you want a bit of protection, this SX grind, really nice addition to the line. Certainly one I can see us doing a lot of, and gives a lot of bunker versatility with that width too. So if you're enjoying the tech content on products, then check out this one that we did recently on late balls. So something that we've all looked at and many of us have purchased online, but do they really make a difference to performance? Check out the video here. So that's a bit about the construction, the milling of the shaping of the head. Now there's the aesthetics, which doesn't affect performance at all, but obviously worth talking about. And I think what TaylorMade have done is a really good job about keeping it clean, simple looking. There's plenty of space on there. If you want to stamp or laser anything on that, it gives a bit of room for doing that. But we can clearly see there's a stepping of the weight through the back. So trying to keep as much mass up the face as possible, the opposite of a wood. In a wood, you want the mass low to launch it high and take spin off. On a wedge, we want the weight up the head, keep launch down and keep spin up. So that's all about weight positioning for optimizing ball flight. And TaylorMade this year have added the charcoal finish. So the MG4 it was a darker black finish. This is a little bit more sort of softened down, slightly, I wouldn't say matted down, but a slightly more sort of satiny kind of finish, sort of softer finish to it. But the fact that it's a bit less dark actually means that the contrast between the raw face and the frame of the head is a little less stark on the black head. As you can see there on the chrome, that face will darken up a little bit being raw, but on the black a little less obvious when you set up over it. You can still get the contrast, but I think it blends a little bit better. And then moving on to the face, so the raw element means you've taken all the plating off, so it'll rust up. That again gives you that softer feel. You haven't got a layer of chrome there. Technically, you could argue, does that mean they wear slightly faster? Possibly, but it gives you that softness of feel. And what they have done in particular, they've got what they call spin tread on it. So this is the extra laser milling that's on the face, and there'll be a close-up of this over my shoulder or on screen now. But that's really designed to help wick moisture off the contact points. So, other brands have got kind of milling patterns and like actual kind of materials or finish that wicks water away. TaylorMade are using the pattern on the face here. So what that does is it really just gets as much moisture dispersed from the face as possible, like the tread of a tire. And that means you get the most ball to face contact. So in various conditions, consistency of launch, maximizing spin. So all of these elements designed to keep feel up as much as possible and spin up as much as possible. So that's enough waffling on about the tech. You really want to know how they perform. So let's get in the bay and hit some shots. So we're going to start off, we're going to hit a few shots, some half swings and some fuller swings. We're going to use the 54 because that's the wedge loft that most golfers will have in their bags rather than kind of going uber high in terms of loft. But talk about some of those characteristics we've just looked at from a design point of view. So one of it is actually the cleanliness of the head shape. It's a nice tight line into the leading edge, into the front edge of the club, the hosel into the leading edge. Nice smooth line. So it's a nice clean line into the back of the ball. And for a half swing, one of the things you really get is that sensation of softness. It sounds like a really obvious comment to make based on what we've talked about from the materials, but you don't get that bit of clickiness off the face that you do out of a lot of other products. Some of that is the fact that the face is raw, and then you've also got that forging that helps give you that nice soft feedback. So let's hit a few more half ones to get a good base bit of data. But it really does, feel on wedge shots is important. You want to feel like you can control the shot, and if it doesn't feel like the ball's jumping off the face, then that helps actually be a little bit more positive with the shot that generates more spin. And you do get that sensation that, people talk about feeling like the ball's running up the face. You certainly get that sensation of the ball, getting a bit of grip and getting that nice sort of slightly stronger lower launch out of it, which is really what we want to feel out of wedge shots. We want it coming in low and then spinning. So we're going into the fuller swing. It's really kind of seeing, does that launch and spin characteristic stay similar? I'd expect a bit more spin because we're hitting it harder, but I'd like to see it in a similar flight window. It's certainly nice getting that feel of softness off the face that retains. Hitting it harder shouldn't change the feel, but you get a nice consistency to that feedback off the face as well. And certainly one of the things, you've got that milling pattern on the sole. It does, it's marginal, but it does feel like it glides through the turf nicely. Because of that rounded back edge, there aren't any hard edges on this head. It feels that the club glides through the turf nicely. It doesn't feel like it catches, which is something that I think just helps a little bit with turf interaction and consistency of divot depth. So let's give that one more, and then we'll talk about the data. But that is a good feeling wedge. So what we did before hitting the TaylorMade is actually got the same data with a Vokey 54 as well. So thought, well, that's the most popular wedge out there on the market. So how does it compare from a performance point of view? Certainly from a feel standpoint, as we said, that definitely is a softer feel. That forged material, that raw face, you definitely get a bit of a softer feedback off it rather than a harder sound. How does that relate to the data? Well, club speed, exactly the same. Interesting on these half shots, what we can see is actually spin comparison. The Vokey produced a slightly lower launch, but a little bit more spin. So actually flight-wise, the TaylorMade is a little bit higher on those half shots versus the Vokey. But what you do get is, the Vokey's coming off the face harder. Now, yes, there is that little bit more spin, but the fact that the ball speed is higher on the Vokey, does that just mean that the distance is harder to control? You could make the argument that that softer ball speed off a wedge head, you're not looking for the ball to come out hot, you can use lofted to determine distance. But it's coming out 5 yards shorter without spin flaring. That means you can be a bit more positive and not have the ball go further than you want. So you could argue that the Vokey hits it a bit more efficiently from a yardage point of view and gets you more distance. But wedges, is that really what we're looking for? Not really. What we can see between the two is that the spin consistency out of the TaylorMade is incredibly good. So, around half that we saw with the Vokey, and is that to do with, those sort of fresh milling techniques and that extra bit of tread, the spin tread that they put the saw milling on the face, is that getting us just that little bit more of a consistent bite? Certainly looks like it. Your distance consistency, couple of yards, 2.5, it's 0.8 of a yard tighter on tolerance. So, is that little bit extra consistency that we're seeing by the looks of it? Yeah, on the half shot, a little tighter dispersion out of this, not quite as much distance, a little bit less spin, but only a very small amount, not enough, a couple of hundred revs, not enough to really see it on course. It's still going to stop. But actually distance tightness, very, very strong. If we move on to the full shots, we see actually a very similar pattern. On the data here, they're flipped around, so the Vokey's on the top and the MG5 on the bottom this time round. So, again, what do we see? Well, launch angle much more similar, but spin, we're only 100 revs apart. The Vokey still holds just a hair more spin than the TaylorMade, but there is again a consistency between ball speed, that 1.06 smash versus 1.09. The Vokey's coming off the face a bit harder. So again, what you're able to do with the TaylorMade is put a bit more speed in and not have it jump. So, spin consistency, broadly speaking, the same when we get to the full shots, and then distance tolerance again, 1.7 yards, 1.9 yards, both very consistent there. So both results are very stable. Certainly, the one thing that the TaylorMade doesn't do is it doesn't come off hot. So by the looks of it versus the most popular wedge on the market, the Vokey gives you a few yards more. But particularly when you're going for partial swings, actually you could argue that that's a negative. And certainly TaylorMade would be going for the fact that that soft forged face, a forged material, the milling on the face, the raw face versus the chrome that we use with the Titleist, is just meaning just that little bit less ball speed, that softer feel. Is that leading to a little bit more action, be able to be more positive with your wedge shots? That would be the line that I would be looking at from this. It allows you to hit the shot a little bit more firmly, a little bit more it's a little bit more commitment, and know that that ball isn't coming off hard. So, big tick for feel, big tick for consistency of performance. Spin rates in a good window. It appears that maybe other wedges might spin just a hair more out of the market, but it's right up there. So actually, from an aesthetics and a performance point of view, there are a lot of tick boxes here, and the versatility of grinds means that we should be able to find something that suits pretty much anybody within these. So all in all, looks like a very, very solid product, and a really good competitor to that leading wedge on the market there with the Vokey. So a really big check mark for TaylorMade for these. I think they'll be very popular.